Hey everyone! Today we are talking about the worst painting supplies in the world. Get ready. But first, if your studio habits need a kick in the butt, Art Prof has everything you need: tutorials, critiques, and professional development. So, okay, first we have fluorescent paint. Now, fluorescent paint, I'll give you the easy reason first. It's really not light fast. It will fall apart on you. Your stuff will not age well. If it hits the sun, it's just going to fade away. I've seen it myself. I know that this happens, but also I had a professor that said that it was kind of a cheat to use fluorescent paint. I don't know, Clara, have you used fluorescent paint at all?
Well, now that I'm doing a lot more color, I actually was eyeing the fluorescent paints that
Like,
I have for the acrylics. But you know something? I tried them and they were so weak. Like I couldn't get like opaque, thick fluorescent paint. I mean, I guess if I painted 30 layers, but that was a big turnoff to me.
Yeah, it's always going to be, you're not going to get a really opaque fluorescent paint unless maybe you're looking at, I don't know, sign paint or something. I don't know the chemical combinations that make it that way, but it just always tends to be that way. So it's very frustrating. So there's that manipulating part of it that's really difficult, but also you can get fluorescent like effects by just using plain old color knowledge, Joseph Albers style, and putting two colors together that have really strong contrast. And I know plenty of artists that do this. They get to use their opaque paints, they get to use their long lasting paints, and it looks great. It also teaches you more about color. You actually use that knowledge and that eye.
Seven Angelic says, yes, all fluorescent paint. Now, to be clear, we're not just talking about golden. We're talking about fluorescent paints, no matter what brand you're talking about, and they're fugitive, 100%. So once I learned that from you, I was like, okay, I'm not missing out on anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like too, there are lots of fugitive paints in the world. I mean, alizarin crimson is a fugitive paint, and I still use alizarin crimson. So I am being a little bit hypocritical, but I have just noticed myself within my lifetime as a painter that my fluorescent paints have been the first to start fading. So it's that having that direct experience that makes me feel so angry about it.
These make me angry. The summer camp I used to work at a billion years ago, they always ordered these and put paint or glue in them. And it always infuriated me because it's a one-time use. It was so wasteful. I was like, have you guys ever heard of ice cube trays? Like, why are we using these paper paint cups? Like, I just have never understood the concept. I mean, maybe you're too lazy to clean things.
Well, okay, Clara, I do have a question about this because although I also think it's silly, they look like little Hershey cups or those things that you put cupcakes in. They look super flimsy, like the paint's just going to liquefy right through them. I think, wouldn't it technically be more wasteful to use those plastic condiment cups that I use? I mean, paper disintegrates after a while, doesn't it?
Well, but these don't last very long. Your condiment cups, I'm sure, are going to last longer than these.
I mean, it's true. I can actually wash those little cups. Do I do it all the time? No, not as much as I'm supposed to. But yeah, it's true. And you save more paint for sure. Like you can't put a top on this. You can't save that paint.
It just hurts me. But we would just toss out 30 of these covered in paint for the end of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the super chat, Jay King, who says, second time catching a live. Art Prof has been a constant source of joy for me. Well, thank you so much for your support. We greatly appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at the next item for you. It's lightweight stretcher bars. What's wrong with these?
Before I say anything, I did recently buy these in a pinch a couple of weeks ago, and it just infuriated me all over again. Brought back the rage. I thought maybe it would be okay, but okay, so let's talk about these stretcher bars. First of all, you never need one, you need 4, and you need 4 of a certain size. And I always end up with the wrong size. Like I always have one that's the wrong size, so it makes all 4 of them useless. That's the first thing. You never have the ones that you need. But then also they're extremely expensive compared to, say, either, I don't know, buying a little canvas from Michael's, or that's the same size, or cutting your own wood, which you can do just by getting a piece of wood from Home Depot, and using a miter saw. Miter saws are not super expensive. And so there just is no need for these. And they're always, especially the thin ones, they're always really crappy. They are always warped. They always have weird alignment. Half the time when you're doing them, they come out in parallelograms instead of at right angles. It's just, I cannot.
The quality is just so bad. I feel like it's actually the exception if I get 4 that are perfectly straight. There's always one that's a little bit off, or sometimes the way they fit is a little strange.
Yeah.
And so they're just really inconsistent. And you're right. If you're going to just paint on a small canvas, I might as well just buy a small pre-stretched canvas, because you can stretch your own canvas with this. But I always got stressed that they would warp. And I have so many stories in art school where I used these and it warped the canvas. And it's just the most stressful thing.
Yeah, you have a little bit, it does take practice, but you have a little bit more control if eventually you can do these on your own. If you really want to go that route and you want to make custom sizes or something like that, it's so much cheaper in the long run.
Less work. I mean, I just feel like it's not really worth it at that point. I mean, I guess you could say, well, I want to do oil ground or some customized type of ground. Sure, I can understand that, but these stress me out. So W315 says lightweight are okay for small canvases. Well, I warped enough canvases in my life that unless it's 8x10, I don't like using these, because I don't like risking that something's going to go wrong.
The ones that I recently bought were for 16 by 20 inch paintings that I was doing, or canvases that I was stretching. And even those had a bow in them. Some of them were shaped like, which I was like, how? It's so short.
Well, Anna says, I buy canvases pre-stretched because I have no patience for stretching canvases. It's a lot of work to stretch canvases. And a lot of the time it's not worth it.
These are different than stretching canvases. It's this particular thing. I also buy pre-stretched canvases from time to time. There are a few that are quite good as long as you get your proper gesso over it. I've got no problem with those as long as you know what you're doing. It's the bars themselves. It's kind of neither one way or the other. It's too meh. It's too in the middle. It leaves you with no good options.
Okay, please explain why wood pellets exist, okay? Because I'm assuming if you're using palette like this, you're probably doing oil or acrylic. Maybe you're doing gouache, although gouache I associate more with plastic palettes and watercolor as well. These are impossible to clean. Why would you ever want this? Can you explain this to me? What's the logic here?
Don't people realize that wood is porous, that wood sucks everything up? If you're using acrylic, it's going to suck all the water out of your acrylic. And if you're using oil, the oil's just going to like bleed right into the surface. And then it's going to be that awful, weird, see-through-y kind of stuff that happens when you put oil on things. Also, I want to say that I hate this shape. Why do people use this shape? I mean, I get it.
It's because the emoji is shaped like that. So now we think all palettes have to look like this. I know emojis
like a Pac-Man. Look at its little eye.
I don't know. I think there's some more ergonomic reasoning behind this, but I've never found these comfortable. I mean,
No.
putting my thumb through this thing and holding it, like, dude, I'd be done with that in about 5 minutes.
Oh, my hands are small. I could fit my whole hand through through some of those thumb holes there.
Tell us in the chat. We know these stink. Although maybe one of you is going to prove us wrong. What palette do you use? Because I am glass palette all the way, because so easy to clean, nice, dirty. Like, why would you do this? How could you possibly clean any acrylic paint off of this and not just be angry afterwards?
Calm Cuke says that they assume that wood palettes have a varnish or a lacquer over them, and that could be the case. This particular one looks like it doesn't, but yes, that would be a better idea. That would offer some protection.
But I don't think it's as good as glass. Like, when I clean my glass palette, it's perfectly clean.
Right.
There's nothing, no residue whatsoever.
Because that's the thing too. Say if you're using, well, if you're using any paint and you need to get the paint off, you have to use one of those little scraper doodads.
Yeah.
And that will get stuck in a lacquer. That will cause a bunch of little rifts, and then paint will get through that. With glass, you don't have that problem so much.
Well, you have a very good point here from C. Cantrell, who says the wood palette goes with your beret.
Oh,
it's a fashion statement. It's people who really want to show off that they're an artist, correct? This is great. All right, let's take a look at the next item, which is hue paint. So, for example, if you have a color that's called alizarin crimson, there are oftentimes alizarin crimson hue, cadmium red hue. So tell us, what is the difference between straight cadmium red versus cadmium red hue?
So you may go to the hues first, because you'll notice that they are priced much, much, much lower than the real paint. And that is because the hue is an approximation of pigments that sort of look like that color, but they don't act like that color. And they also tend to be filled with a crap load of filler, tons and tons of filler. And so what happens is when you use them, you end up wasting a lot of paint, and your paintings look crappy because they just become very dull very quickly because of how much paint and how many different pigments and how much filler is within it. Now, there's some ways that you can get around, like there's some colors that you have to use a hue for, because there is such thing as extinct colors, as extinct pigments, which I think is so cool. You can go up and see it. But I'm talking about your general cadmium hues, rose madder hue, those kinds of things, the ones you usually see in the art store. No go. It'll make your paintings look dull.
Well, Neil brings up a good point. Aren't the hue paints generally less costly than the straight pure colors?
Yes. And this is, again, if you can afford it, get the ones that aren't hues. I absolutely empathize and have been that person that can only afford hue paints. And so just be aware that there are certain colors that you'll have a lot harder time with simply because they are hues. And there are colors that you can use that are not hue to sort of get around this. So if you're using cadmium red, you could say use a naphthol red, which looks a little bit similar, but is not as difficult to mix.
Well, we do have some good points here about health hazards. Anna Catbutt says, I have kidney failure, have to stay away from any kind of heavy metals like cadmium. And Jane also says, not interested in having heavy metals in my house, so I prefer the hues. I'm also not selling my work yet, so not really a big deal. So, of course, you're in a certain situation, and that is not really viable to never use the hue paints. But what I tend to do is I'll just have maybe one color that I really care about that I will not buy as a hue. Like you just told me to buy Golden's cadmium red, and it's so good. It's so yummy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love it.
There are some colors where it really, really, really does make a difference, but there are, I would say, instead of going to hues, again, because they are so full of the different type, like so many different colors to make that mixture, look for a color that is similar but is made up of only, say, 1 or 2 pigments in the mixture, because that's going to keep, from when you're mixing your own colors, it's going to keep your colors from getting dull. A lot of the newer colors, a lot of the, I'm going to call them like chemical colors, like phthalo and all of that, those, and dioxazine, those ones are not heavy metals, but they are only made of like 1 or 2 pigments, and those are going to do a lot better. I'm sorry, there's a cat pawing at my door and I have to let him out.
Otherwise,
Otherwise, we're
serious?
did you
Oh
hear
my
that?
goodness.
I'm,
Yes,
I'm
I
so
did.
sorry. It's Tor. He's such a jerk. I didn't even know he was in here. I thought I closed him out. He was under the bed.
All right. Well, we have a question here from Kaleidoscope who's asking, are hue paints safer than the alternative? I guess I would reason that because there's less of the pure pigment and metal, that technically they would be a little bit safer. I don't know.
Yes, they are safer. They are safer in that they don't have that heavy metal in it. There are things that you can also do to protect yourself while you are using, say, not safe paints. They don't have to be scary. Gloves are the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
That chemical, you're not going to have any reaction with that chemical as long as you're wearing gloves and not getting it on your skin. You're not going to breathe it in unless you're sanding it, which don't sand your paints.
Okay, why do they sell these? This is the dumbest thing. Can you imagine how long it would take to put your brushes and every single one of these stupid sleeves, and then even make sure the sleeve is the right size for the brush? I will never understand this.
I keep thinking I keep doing devil's advocate with these kinds of things, being like, oh, someone must use this. Someone must have a good use for this. And I keep thinking, oh, people that paint outside that need to transport their paints. But honestly, I see more people use a toolbox that they keep all their paintbrushes in, or some kind of organizer like that. These, yeah, like that. These organizers, yeah, I've
yogurt container.
I've had ideals that I would have a nice, pretty set of paints and paintbrushes, but no, it's impractical.
It just takes too long. I mean, if I'm painting, okay, and let's say I have a lot of brushes and I clean them, what am I going to sit here and go, oh, yeah, it goes in here. Oh, wait, that didn't fit. Let me take it out and find the right slot. Oh, wait. And then, like, the canvas organizer is super stupid because isn't it going to get super gross after a while?
Oh, yeah, it's going to get covered in paint after the first time, especially if you're using oils.
Yeah, why would you want to do that? Because my brushes are never clean. They always have crap on them. And I just feel like this is just so silly. I mean, maybe they're helpful, but I just stuff my brushes into my bag and I get, that's all I need. I don't need this thing.
I do have a brush organizer, but it's one of those plastic ones that you see in stores that holds all the brushes, because I have a ton of brushes and I need to at least be able to see them by type. But this doesn't really help you. Each slot thing is really annoying.
It's super dumb. See, this is what I do. This is my technique too, Oopsie. My watercolor travel set, I throw the crap in a bag and go. Exactly. That's all you really need. And Calm Cuke says they always manage to bend the bristles of my brushes, even when they're the perfect size for the organizer. Yeah,
that's the thing that happens too. I can't get around this. Every time I travel with my paints, and I brought them here up to New Hampshire, actually, which is where I am right now, they always get bent. I just keep them in a bag and I try to make enough room for them, but they always get bent. If anybody's got tips on that, I would love that.
Thank you so much, J. King. We so much appreciate it. I don't know. I just feel like this is for people who want to look pretty while they paint. Mm-hmm. And really, why? I got enough problems. I'm going to make a painting.
There's got to be someone very particular that is very clean, probably uses those mechanical erasers that we talked about last stream, very precise, that really gets a lot out of this, and more power to you. Please teach us your ways.
Yes. All right, Lauryn, I got a beef to pick with you.
We're going to, I thought this was a pretty not what's the word?
Controversial.
Confrontational. Yeah. Controversial pick. Like, I didn't think anybody loved fan brushes. We always joke about them in my classes at school. I know
You
one
do?
person who uses a fan brush. Yeah, I've tried using fan brushes. I do have fan brushes. I do not see a use for them that other brushes couldn't do. And I know that you have a painting. I know you have paintings where you've used fan brushes, but I look at those marks and I say, I could have used 100 different brushes to do this.
But why do you need 100 brushes? You got the fan brush.
I mean,
That's all you need.
Like, you look like a maid using a feather duster using one of those. Like,
what are you saying? This looks like a Swiffer or something?
Yeah, it looks like a Swiffer.
Well, I don't care what I look like when I paint. I'm not concerned about aesthetics because I'm a real painter.
Oh, shots fired!
Come on, these are so useful when you're trying to just do like the most delicate light touch. Like, I'm not going to do that with this bristle brush. Like, this bristle brush here, it's like super heavy handed and
no, the bristle brush keeps you from getting too precious about things. I feel like getting a fan brush just immediately relegates you into detail world, and then
it does not.
Yes.
Come on, I used it on my orangutan painting string.
I know,
and there was no
for those
detail.
wispy hairs, which you could have done with one mark with any other brush.
Yikes.
Yeah. See, okay. Maldives Baby says, I bought a fan brush and never used it. That is how I feel. I tried to use it once and then it was no, it's so floppy too. They're usually so floppy.
Yeah, but that's why they're good, because you want it to be just so delicate. Maybe you're just too brash of a painter or something. You can't appreciate the delicacy of a fan brush.
I love that there is a fan club. That's a good one. A fan club, fan brush club.
Big fan. See, Tal uses them for abstract painting. And let's see. Lourdes says, never use a fan brush in my life. I don't even think I know how. Well, just try it. It's very helpful. Maybe you're just writing it off. You're making assumptions.
I'm just doing it wrong.
Well, I'm
just an idiot around fan brushes, I guess.
Exactly. Okay, these should never be made ever. This makes me angry because these don't function. And I'm sure some people have some purpose for them. But come on, they're so stiff. Like, see this palette knife, this metal one? Look, you see this boing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not going to get that with a plastic palette knife.
You can also use the metal ones forever and ever and ever and ever. They never... I've had my same one since the beginning, since I was 16, I think.
I bought this one when I was in art school in the 90s.
Yeah, so they last forever. This is another case here where it's just, why are you doing this to the environment, getting these plastic? I mean, we use acrylics and lots of other things that are not very sustainable, but you can at least get rid of the plastic knives. It's like no more plastic straws, no more plastic food knives either.
What are you benefiting from here? You have something that doesn't even behave like the tool it's trying to be, and they're just super flimsy. And with a palette knife, one of the things that I find very important is be able to really put pressure on it without worrying that your stupid tool is going to break, which these totally can in a second.
Yeah, they just too brittle, I think. They also stain, and I'm one of those people that loves having a perfectly clean palette knife. I love wiping it off at the end, and these get stained with certain colors, which like phthalo, like the phthalos, which I do not like.
Well, they're also too thick. Have you noticed this? They're always way thicker than the metal ones. The metal ones are nice and thin, which gives you a lot more flexibility. So maybe somebody was like, oh, I'll make this because it'll be the cheaper option. And I'm like, no, this is like really, really bad. Like if I was given this, I'd be like, oh my God, I hate palette knives. I never
Yeah.
want to use one.
Yeah. I mean, and it's sad because usually they are purchased for students learn it in bulk classes, learning how to paint for the first time. That's certainly why I would use them. But it's a bad introduction to using palette knives.
Cheap canvas boards. I hate these too.
I hate them so much.
They're the worst. Who likes these? Because they are really inexpensive. So in a pinch, sometimes I'd be teaching at RISD and, oh, you forgot to get a canvas. So you run to the store and you buy one. But other than that, these are the worst.
They're good practice. But also, if you're going to practice, one thing that we did in school was work on either sheets of cardboard or MDF, which is cheaper, ultimately cheaper than the cheap canvas boards, and teaches you how to gesso and things. And these boards, you can't ever make anything that's going to last on that. First of all, wait, okay, so they're canvas, but you're going to need a frame for them because there's no way to put them on your wall or anything. And they're too thick a lot of the time to stick in a regular frame. So it's just, they're this in-between thing that I don't know why they have to exist. And they also have cheap cardboard on the back of them. So they're also not going to last very long over time either.
Also, they always warp. I feel like I've never had a canvas board that didn't warp. It's like, why are you guys creating a surface for a wet material made of something that doesn't stay? Like, that's to me the most annoying thing about any painting surface. If it's warped or if it's crooked, like that is such a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that happens to me is when I was first learning how to oil paint on them, the oil transfers onto the back side. It always starts at the corners and goes around. And then again, you have that weird, gross, oily surface that is just ruined forever. Oh yeah, and oh my God, Amanda's saying that the gesso is awful on them.
It's true, yeah.
They're so bad. It's so bad. No, I mean, for even just like prepared canvases in general, they always have that kind of gross surface to them. It's always better to gesso over the like gesso with your own gesso on top of it, several layers before going in on those because it's always bad.
All right. I'm sorry if you guys like this, but I feel like there's so many options at a hardware store that cost a fraction of this and do the job 10 times better.
Wait,
tell us in the chat.
I use this.
You do? Oh my gosh, really? I feel like this is so useless.
I'm not really an oil painter. It was said it cleans brushes, so I got it.
Tell us in the chat. What do you use to clean your brushes? I always use that Gojo orange pumice stuff. It's so good.
We have a mutiny here, Clara.
Oh, yikes. Yikes. This is going to be
Everybody's mad. Everybody's mad.
Come on. The Gojo soap is so good. It's so much better. This stuff is just, it's so weak.
I've not had any issues with this. I mean, I do know the whole, you can use vegetable oil, you can, there's hardware store stuff, but this, it just makes me feel professional.
Is it because it's called The Masters? So you feel like you're a master?
It's got nice branding on it. And it works fine. I don't have problems with it. It is expensive though.
See? Doug says, I've used the same cake of Masters for more than 20 years. Works great for me. Acrylic paint on Kolinsky's sable brushes. Keep your pumice away from me. Well, there was another cleaner I liked a lot. It was called D&L hand cleaner. And to me, it's like any industrial cleaner is just really awesome and powerful. And like, I don't need this dinky little brush cleaner.
I feel like... I don't have enough experience with this because I usually use acrylics and water and that does fine. I've used the same brushes again since I was at RISD and they're crappy brushes. They're from Michaels. So not having issues cleaning things, but I feel like using that industrial stuff is going to tear things apart with all those little bits in it.
Amanda doesn't think so. Ha! All right. What's wrong with student grade gesso?
This is me being a snob. This is me being a snob.
I'm a
I
snob too here.
I realize gesso is another thing that gets very expensive very quickly, and sometimes you can't get around student grade gesso. But if you have the money ever to upgrade to professional gesso, be that through Blick or Liquitex or what's it? Arts Advantage, not Arts Advantage, the Utrecht brand. I don't remember it. I actually really like the Utrecht brand, and it's fairly cheap for artist grade gesso, but it's so much better. The student grade gesso, it tends to be really watered down, so if you use a lot of it to get a good coating, it also gets really plasticky, and that will soak up your paint and make it less luminous. I used to think, oh, that's just people are snobby, whatever, I'm just going to use this forever. But it did make a huge difference in my action on the canvas, my ability to go back into things, and the brightness of my paintings when I moved over to artist grade gesso.
So I actually used this Frederick's gesso once. I'm not kidding. It came out like cottage cheese. And I was like, what is this? And I had another student grade gesso I used in art school that was so thin and just pathetic.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Like, it doesn't even feel like gesso. And so, yes, it costs more to buy the professional one. But if you know you're going to not care that much about the surface, it's like just buy a cheap pre-stretched canvas. You don't have to gesso it.
Right. And this is actually a way to save money too, is if you get the pre-gesso canvases, either pre-stretched or that just pre-gesso roll, and then you only need to put, say, 2 coats of gesso on rather than 4. I actually really like that method. Or maybe you put your crappy gesso on the bottom and then put your nice gesso on top. That could also work too. I totally empathize with I've used all of these methods for cutting costs. What happens though with the student grade gesso is that over time, you end up spending just as much on gesso using the student grade gesso as you would just getting one thing of the artist grade gesso, because you have to use so much student grade gesso to get a good surface when that ends up mattering to you.
I think at the very least, let's say you do 2 layers of professional gesso. I think student grade is at least 4 layers, if not more, to achieve remotely the same coverage. And it's also, it doesn't feel good under my brush. So yes, we're not fans. So when I taught at RISD, I always had this design project where I'd have them work in gouache. So we do these complementary color charts. And I understand gouache is not cheap, especially the professional grade. That's really, really good. And I would say to them, listen, you don't need a big set. Just get the primaries and get white. And so you're just getting 4 tubes and that. But inevitably, there's always somebody who wants more colors or somebody who wants to save money. And so they buy the Reeves Gouache. This is the crappiest gouache on the planet. It shouldn't even be marked gouache. It should be marked like, this is what gouache is like when it sucks.
Wait, I like this comment from Anna Catbutt. Reeves tricked me with their sleek design. Yeah, it would have tricked me too. I was going to say, Clara, this looks so nice and modern though.
It's so drippy. I'm like, how dare you call yourself gouache? That this is just a crime against humanity, that this is called gouache. It's not okay.
I think this might be the gouache that I used when I was learning gouache, and why I never used gouache again.
You see? And so there's just thousands of artists out there thinking, I'm going to learn gouache. And they use the crappy, and they're like, oh my God, never again. And so this company has not done much for the state of gouache in today's lives.
Is there a gouache that you recommend that is affordable but not terrible?
I always tend to like the Winsor & Newton designer gouache. And again, as Doug says up here, don't get the set, just get the colors you want. Yeah. And yes, they cost fit per thing. Although I think they do have a set that's like 5 colors or something.
Mhm.
But it's like I would just rather never paint than paint with Reeves Gouache. I would just stop painting. All right, what's up with this? Plastic tacks are super helpful.
That's a weird one, right? Well,
Yeah.
this I discovered. Okay, first of all, I don't know if any of you have experienced this before, but my plastic tacks, the heads of them always break off, and then I'm left with a not very useful tack that just has the neck, and nothing can, and it's hard to pull in and out. Can't really, hard to maneuver. So what you could get instead, there are 2 different types of tacks that are great. One is metal tacks. I
Yeah,
love
those are good. I like those.
I love them. They will
They're
never
longer.
break. Yeah, they're longer. They'll never break. They're sturdier. You can hang heavier paintings on them. That's a thing that I do a bad thing where I use tacks instead of nails on dubiously sized paintings. And then there's another type of tack that I think was sold on Blick, either that or it might have even been at Staples, that was kind of like a soft plasticky type, rubbery type almost. It was easier on my fingers because, as you know, when you have to put in 20 of these, it's horrible. You get blood blisters on your fingers. So no. Check out the soft tacks. They're out there.
I hate disposable palettes. I hate them so much. Okay, I hate them on multiple levels. Okay, they just don't compare to a gloss palette, and they're wasteful. Using them all the time. But the other really stupid thing is you can go to any grocery store and buy freezer paper.
Oh yeah,
and it's this giant roll of the exact same thing for a quarter of the price. And so I get it. Sometimes a disposable palette is a little bit more convenient for one reason or another. You don't have a glass palette, fine. Just go to the grocery store. Don't buy this at the art store. It's such a ripoff.
I've got a confession.
What?
I've got about 100 of these palette paper. Yeah.
I thought that you used the continent cups.
I do, but since I also paint in oil part of the time now, my glass palette is small. Sometimes if I need a supplementary, if I'm working on more palettes than is the size of my glass palette, I will, use it to spread my palette out. And
oh my gosh,
I forgot that you could use freezer paper, so thank you. But freezer paper doesn't come in gray color. I love the disposable palette paper that's gray color. It's really helpful.
That's true. I hate disposable palettes. They're so flimsy, and it's like you press your palette knife and like the paper's going up and down. And most of these are white. I don't see the gray ones all the time.
I only get the gray ones.
But the white of the palette drives me crazy because you can't really see how the colors are behaving. That's the reasoning behind a gray palette, everybody, so that way you can see that better. But these just bother me. And then the other stupid thing is the ones that have a hole in them for your phone.
I know. It's like combining all the bad things. It's like there's a meme of an Ugg boot with Internet Explorer pattern and Nicolas Cage coming out of the top of it, which is all of the worst things that can possibly exist together. And that's how I feel about those palettes with the hole in them using the bad paper.
Okay, please explain to me why anybody would pay $800 for a brush.
I need to know.
Please. Okay, if somebody here can give me a believable reason for spending your money like this, I will, I don't know. Maybe I'll dance.
Philip Guston or Jeff Koons or someone has the $800 brush?
I just think it's, how could $800 possibly be important to making a brush? I would rather take a flight to France than buy the stupid brush. I mean, can it really be that great?
This reminds me a lot of when I was a competitive swimmer, and I was a somewhat good competitive swimmer. Like, I was serious about swimming, but I wasn't like a good, really, really good swimmer. And they would sell at some of these meets what they would call, say, like racing suits or paper suits that were made out of material that was supposed to be faster than skin. And so serious swimmers have to wear serious suits that would shave off time. But really, if you're not, first of all, you have to be that level where that even makes sense to do. And I feel like the majority of us in the world, this is the equivalent in brushes. The majority of us in the world are not good enough for this brush.
Shorty says something illegal must have gone into that brush. Maybe it's got hairs from a 2 billion year old primitive something in it.
Yeah. It's just for looking, not for using. Can you imagine the pressure of using that brush? Of getting any.
What if you lost it? It's not that big.
I would just, what if the hairs on it did that thing where they spider out? Like, what if the brush bent? What if you took it out and it bent? You need one of those brush holders. One of the brush organizers.
It's nice little pillow, and give it the spa treatment or something. But so even brushes that are $100, I think, are sort of absurd, because honestly, if I had expensive brushes, I feel like I'd be scared to use them.
I, again, have the same brushes from Michael's for $3, the $3 set that I've had since being in college, and they're still working and they're still great. So I don't know anything about brush quality. Maybe there's someone who does, but the cheap ones hold up pretty well.
Well, W315 is saying probably dead rare rodents. And we have some other theories here. For example, King of the Fall says unicorn.
Yes.
Well, okay. Maybe I'll pay for that. Everybody, we've got one workshop left for June. That is this Saturday. It is drawing gestural portraits and primates. And so there is still a few spots left. You still have time to register for this. Go to the homepage of artprof.org. Please join Lauryn and I. We will be in the Discord doing a stage session, which is your opportunity to speak to us on voice. So we hope you can join us there in the post live streams stage channel. Art Prof has services. We have artist calls, personal art curriculums, statement editing, portfolio critiques. Join our Patreon group. We have so much fun in there. It's like a 24/7 art party. We have staff who show up for weekly art sessions, voice sessions, where you can share your work, and you get lots of support and critiques from me in the Patreon group, which I do not provide in the public channels. Most of all, though, support in a small group of artists. Our Discord server is so gigantic. I think it's over 11,000 members, so it's very easy to get lost. But in this group, people really get to know each other. Thank you to our top Patreon supporters. You are all incredible for being here with us and helping us keep art education free and accessible to everybody. Visit artprof.org. There is so much content on there that is not on YouTube. Plus, I will be sad that all the work I put into the website doesn't get looked at. So use the search bar on the website to find what you're looking for. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And subscribe to our channel for more tutorials, critiques, and business tips. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.